right, let's testify, man. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And good morning, everybody. I hope that you are doing as well as you possibly can. This has been a difficult week for me, this last week. I just want to make this clear. I look around on things like social media and stuff on the internet, and I see two groups of people. One primarily people that are far left leaning, uh, basically celebrating the fact that Charlie Kirk was killed. And the other, on the political right, that are basically making him out to be an American hero, uh, if not a martyr. And so I'll tell you the reason it's been a difficult week for me is not because Charlie Kirk was shot. Well, I would agree that it's tragic to see a 32-year-old father of two gunned down in his prime. I think that I feel for his wife, his children, uh, you know, the turning point, that whole organization rested on his ability to to go out and argue and present the case for his particular brand of conservatism. So all these people are horribly impacted by this, and I feel for them, and I pray for those people, and my heart goes out to them genuinely. But and so let me say this: anybody out there that is trying to post or talk about how awesome it is that Charlie Kirk was killed, um, f you, f anybody that thinks like that. If you think like, I don't think anybody in my honestly in my audience would think like that. But if you did, I don't want you around here because I feel this. It's just like when you remember the one actor that I cannot stand with a passion is Will Wheaton. And it's not because I thought Wesley Crusher was an annoying character. He was, but that's not why. I could get past that. It's the whole thing about him posting on Facebook how he wanted Trump dead. And you guys know I've been very critical of President Trump, and I disagree with President Trump frequently. But anybody that sits there and posts that they want the man to be dead is a disgusting excuse for a human being, in my opinion, and that includes Will Wheaton. Um, and so I think about those people that are just jovial about it. I think are just some of the worst people on the planet. However, he also was not an American hero. He was a conservative influencer. He was not a saint. He was not a martyr. I know his wife got out there and in her speech, described him as a martyr, and it's like that's an abuse of the term, in my opinion. A martyr is a person who literally dies for Christ, right? So, people who are killed because because of Jesus Christ and nothing more. I don't believe that the gunman killed him because of the fact that he was Catholic. I think that they killed him because he was a harsh right wing conservative. And those are two different things. In fact, most Catholics are not conservative. So, in some ways, it's kind of odd for being a Catholic. But he wasn't killed because he believed in Christ. He was killed because he believed in the principles of the MAGA movement. And so that those are two very, very different things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that you can't believe in Christ and believe in the MAGA movement, but they're not the same thing. And to be a martyr, you know, it requires that you're killed because of your belief in Christ. Further, I don't call him a hero because what has he done? I mean, just and I know if put aside. You're right, Gorilla. He wasn't Kelly. He was evangelical because I keep getting him and Michael Knowles confused because Michael Knowles is uh, uh, the uh, the Catholic of that group. Um, uh, and so uh, and by the way, so the actual definition of the word martyr, just to be clear, because I saw what you said there, Stan. It's not specifically about Christ, but the term martyr means a person who is killed because of their religious beliefs. Okay, it's not because someone is killed because they're conservative. Um, but the um, but let's talk about the word hero for a moment because everybody's calling him a hero, and um, you know, I really really have a problem with calling someone like Charlie Kirk a hero, um, because at least to me, and I understand that words can be somewhat flexible as far as their definitions, but to me, when I think of a hero, I think of, and I posted this on Facebook, I think about the firefighters from 9/11. Those are heroes, right? People that ran into danger to save others. People who are willing to put to truly, and it is a Christian principle, but to truly put the lives of others ahead of yourselves. Um, and in fact, one of the recent school shootings, there was a child who laid on top of his friend to protect him, and that kid was killed or shot. I don't remember. I think he was killed, but I could be wrong. Um, and that is a hero. That kid we should be celebrating as a hero right now, not Charlie Kirk. And in fact, and this is from the conservatives out there. What I and okay, so and I'm sorry for being a little disjointed because I just want to. I'm trying to be careful about what I say because I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I am trying to get my point out there. Um, when I think about Charlie Kirk, I think about a guy who is taking a stick and whacking at a beehive, and he was killed by bees. Right? Uh, he was constantly trying to agitate people, and he unfortunately agitated someone who happened to be a psychopath. And I, I think that that to me is not the actions of a hero because a hero doesn't go out trying to cause trouble and then being killed by it. A hero is a person who sees a problem and moves in to make it right. Now, some people would argue that, well, he sees problems in the American political system and he was out there advocating for conservatism, which is great. And lots of people do that. However, he was purposely going out into, some of the most liberal parts of the country, mostly college campuses, and and provoking people with his arguments. Now, I noticed, I think Stan put it, I'll get to the comments in a minute, but Stan mentioned that he was often right. He was. I agreed with him on most of his points when it came to um, economics, except for the tariff thing. I agreed with him on when he talks about the radical trans movement and the radical LGBTQ movement and all that. I totally agree with him. But he and others like him, Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro, and others, I think that they really miss the boat when they talk about race, right? They do not, and I get it because, uh, I grew up middle class white America, right? Granted on a ranch, but still, I understand that to a point. And when if you had asked me about race in 1986, I probably would have said, racism's not a big deal in America. I don't know what people are talking about. Um, but then after I got together with my wife, I started seeing things from a bit of a different perspective because all of a sudden, and to me it seemed really strange, but to her it was perfectly normal. Every time we went into a department store, the plainclothes security people were always following us around. All of a sudden, whenever we went out driving together, particularly at night, the police would follow us. All of a sudden, when we go to the deli counter, we always get picked last. That kind of stuff. And people like Charlie Kirk would constantly dismiss that kind of thing as being grossly exaggerated or non existent. They would argue that there's no such thing as systemic racism because and this is like to me it's a fallacious argument, but they would argue that the reason that there's no racism is because legally all races have the same rights, right? And because and commonly one of his arguments would be is tell me something in America that a white person can do that a black person can't. And most of the people that he's arguing with can't really articulate an answer because of the fact that legally speaking, he's right. Right, legally speaking, the law is set to be equal among everybody. That doesn't mean that in practice people are treated equally. It doesn't mean that if you are in certain cities like Portland, Oregon, and you get pulled over driving while black, you're going to be treated a whole lot different than if you're white. And the problem is that people just ignore that. Oh, that doesn't happen. That's not true. Well, it's easy to say when you haven't experienced it much. Now, the flip side of that, and this is kind of interesting, is that like groups like Ben Shapiro's group and stuff like that, and I think Charlie Kirk was as well. They're centered in Nashville. Now, don't get me wrong. Nashville's a fine city. And in fact, that's part of the problem is that Middle Tennessee, where I happen to live now, is one of the most racist free zones I've ever seen, at least in the United States. My wife and I have never been treated better than living here in Middle Tennessee. It's in fact quite stark the difference. You don't realize it until you actually experience. Like my wife still can't get over the fact that when the police show up, it's not a reason to get apprehensive, right? Because they're genuinely trying to do their job. They're genuinely trying to help people, and they're not just picking on people because they're color. That we get good service or everywhere we go, or at least like the service industry is kind of declining, but at least we get the same service as everybody else wherever we go. We're not followed around by the plainclothes security all the time anymore. So it's very much different here in Middle Tennessee. And people like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and stuff are all headquartered in Nashville here in Middle Tennessee. And so, of course, they don't see it. Plus the fact that, like, I know Ben Shapiro is technically not white, but they're all basically, they would pass as white. And and so that makes it so it's kind of harder to see it anyway. The only one that had in that group that had any kind of cred as far as trying to say something like that would have been Candace Owens. But Candace Owens, honestly, let's be real, she's Batwoman crazy. And she was so Batwoman crazy that she got fired from that group. So I really, really, really am tired of the idolization of this man. He was an outspoken conservative influencer. That's all he was. He was good at it. And in fact, he was one of the best. But, and forgive me if I sound bitter about this, but I am. When was the last? I mean, the government's response to this was so over the top that it borders on suspicious. And when I say that, listen, I listened to some of the. So when Kash Patel was talking about the if you watch the press conference, he was talking about the timeline of events, right? And the FBI, the local police chief, and the FBI were on scene within 16 minutes. 16 minutes. The F freaking B-I. Now, let me make this clear. I'm glad that the guy was arrested. But the funny thing is, if you watch the press conference, they're all patting themselves on the back on what a great job in police work this is. But at the guy basically was talked into turning himself in. The FBI didn't really do anything to change to actually solve the crime. Besides that, this wasn't even a case where the FBI should be involved at all. And when I say that, look, I'm not an expert on federal law enforcement, but I do have the same access to the internet as everybody else. And a very quick cursory search shows you can see exactly when the FBI gets involved in a murder investigation. If the murder is taking place on federal property, this was not. Even if this was a state school, then it would have been state property, not federal property. If the victim of the murder was a federal official, so like if it was an FBI agent that was killed, or or a judge, or something like that. If this was involved with interstate commerce, obviously it wasn't, but that's if this took place on tribal land, then the FBI would be involved. If this was a civil rights case, it's not. Like, if a civil rights case would be something like if a police officer had done it, that would be a violation of civil rights. Even though, yes, technically, one person killing another is a violation of their rights, it's not a civil rights case unless it's a civil servant basically attacking a civilian. It doesn't be, or something like that. If this was an international crime, obviously it wasn't. And if there was federal laws violated. So, for example, I know this sounds silly, but the FBI would be completely within their rights to bust someone for having their front windshield tinted on their car, because that's not like in the state of Tennessee has no laws on the books about tinting your front window. The FBI, or not the federal government, does. That's illegal on a federal level, which is why if you tint your front window, then you can, you get busted no matter what state you're in, because there's no way to circumvent that. But the FBI was on scene in 16 minutes. Okay, not only that, the director of the FBI, the director of ATF, the governor of the state, and of course the local sheriff were all there at the press conference, right, giving their little statements. Not only that, but the President of the United States was delivering updates as to what was going on. We found out that Donald Trump was the one who announced that he was dead. Donald Trump was the one who announced that they had brought the shooter into custody. And I'm sitting there, not even his press secretary, it was Donald Trump himself doing this. The President of the United States was giving updates as to the status of the case. Tell me any time in history that's been the case, that on a murder, and obviously there are some things that the president's going to talk about if there's like an international crisis or whatever, but in a murder, a straightforward murder, when has the president of the United States ever been the person to update the people as to the status of everything? Not only so, you have the president, you have the director of the FBI, who was, according to him, taking him at his word, that he was there within 24 hours, and he got like no sleep. They said he got like an hour's sleep over the course of 36 hours. And he was on site helping the investigation, walking around, trying to figure out how the shooter did it and all that. Kash Patel himself was conducting the investigation on Charlie Kirk's murder. When does the director of the FBI actually conduct an investigation? When? The response, calling it overkill, doesn't even come close to describing it. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not upset that they got the guy. I just don't. But we had a school shooting last week, and nobody's talking about it because everybody's all worried about Charlie Kirk's death. But we've had a dozen school shootings in recent times, and how often do you see updates on the school shooting from the President of the United States and the Director of the FBI? When mass murders happen, and everybody, and sure, if the gunman is killed or the gunman is captured, we're all glad about that. But at the same time, we don't have this insane level of response to it from the federal government. And it tells me something that's very clear. If you happen to be buddies with Donald Trump, or in this case, I think J.D. Vance and Kirk were good friends, then you're going to get all the response in the world. But what about those kids? Did the FBI show up at the school in 16 minutes? Did Kash Patel walk the scene and help determine how it was done? Did the President of the United States deliver updates to a mourning public that was dealing with the loss of those kids? No. It was just another day. But not only all that, but now Donald Trump is giving Charlie Kirk what is it called? The Medal of Freedom, or whatever, the highest medal that a civilian can get from the government. For what? For being an influencer? For agreeing with Trump on most things, he gets a medal. I'm sorry. And so, look, the reason and just so anybody wants to criticize me, and it's fair, you say, well, man, you spent 2 minutes talking about the people on the left, and you're just railing on people on the right for all this time. That's because the people on as far as the people that are cheering about the death of anybody, I find that disgusting, and I think any sane person should find that disgusting, and I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. But this radical response that we got from the federal government, and this ridiculous notion that Charlie Kirk was some kind of iconic hero and martyr. And the thing is, I know people that agree with that. Um, you know, none of the people involved would listen to this show, so I can say it. But my wife is involved in in a small group with our church, and she can't go right. She's taken a couple of weeks off from the small group because of the response from people in her group. Uh, we didn't go to church last night like we usually. Now, I'm going to, obviously I'm not going to stop going to church, but sometimes I needed a break because, I was feeling a little under the weather anyway, but at the same time, look, I'm not gonna lie. This is something that really disturbed me. Even though, like, again, I'm not gonna stop going to this church. I don't, suddenly hate because I still love the Experience Community Church. I think it's the best church I've ever attended. But the fact that our pastor, the almost immediately after Charlie Kirk died, posted on Facebook um, uh, a quote about martyrs, and then didn't allow comments on that quote. But he put this quote about how, like, the road to heaven is paved with the blood of martyrs or something, which is a quote from times past. And I was like, really? Be- no, I'm sorry. He was nobody's martyr. He was just a man. He was a man who believed in the cause, and he argued and articulated for the cause incredibly well. But he was not he was not a hero. I'm sorry. All right, end of rant. I hope you guys don't hate me now. I've already lost most of my audience, so hopefully I don't just alienate the rest of you. But now let's get right to it. Man. So Gorilla, good to see you, buddy. Says I just let loose on my anger and disappointment last night against both sides, and it didn't hold back. Well, I'm pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but I'm glad, Gorilla. I mean, I think that those of us that can see that both extremes are going crazy here need to speak up because, I'm sorry, a person isn't a hero because they're conservative. They don't deserve a medal because they're conservative. It should not be a partisan thing. Because what's next? Does that mean that when um, a Democrat gets elected, they're going to start handing out medals to crazy liberals? Fodder Stomp in the house says, Hail Kuroga. Good to see you. Stan Lee says, my brother is a public high school teacher in Canada. When I talked to him, his reaction was the guy was an a-hole, but nobody deserves that. And that's the thing. If a liberal says that, I have no problem with it. Because when it comes to issues of race, I would totally agree with that. On almost everything else, I agreed with Charlie Kirk. But when it comes to race, man, he missed the boat. Stan says, I wasn't a hardcore fan, but I definitely agreed with at least some of the things he said. Agreed. I didn't tell him to F off. I told him I was disappointed in them and I pity them. Okay. Has martyr been hasn't martyr often been used as a term to describe anyone who dies for a cause? I think that on a stretch level, you could try to say that, but the people who are using the term martyr are specifically using it in the context of it because he's a Christian, and in fact, that's his wife said he was a martyr because, and the last thing he did was witness to people in the name of Christ. And I'm sorry, yes, he talked about religion frequently, and I applaud him for his willingness to openly discuss his beliefs. However, uh, he generally didn't go out there to witness to people about Jesus Christ. He went out there to witness the cause of MAGA. Charlie wasn't a Catholic. He was, yeah. Even I stand corrected on that. For some reason, I thought he was. I don't know why. I didn't even realize it's specifically about Christ. Okay, so we already addressed that. And then I guess I looked up the definition. So martyr has been reappropriated. In a way, yes. Fed Doc in the house says, I have many thoughts of this, most of them deep rage. However, though it vexes me to obey, I have to consider this. Things as lost versus just evil. Yeah, look, the shooter, what he did was obviously sick and wrong, and assuming, and the thing is, remember, in the American justice system, you are innocent until proven guilty. So even though everybody's like, oh, yeah, we got the guy, do we know with 100% certainty that's the guy? We're just told by these federal officials that he's the guy. But until the evidence is laid out in a court of law, he is innocent until proven guilty. So we need to be careful about that. But whoever committed this heinous act, uh, I think is evil. I don't think Charlie Kirk was evil. I just think he was wrong about race. He was a crap disturber. Yeah, that's one way to put it. An intelligent one that was often correct, but still, yes. And to be clear, by thing, I mean the shooter. I didn't know Kirk well, but from what I know, he seemed like a decent man. Yeah, on most issues, I think Kirk was a pretty good guy. And he seemed like a genuinely nice guy, even though he's quite confrontational. But then I am as well. And so I think I'm a nice guy, but I'm also a person who never backs down from a good debate. But you should have the right to agitate people without worrying about being shot. I tend to agree. The thing is, and the irony is that a lot of people are bringing up the fact that showing the quote from him about how people being shot and killed is an acceptable consequence to the Second Amendment. That it's better to have guns out there and a few people get shot than to have no guns, because the idea is that then you could have a tyrannical government that has total control. And I can see the logic in that. Is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, right? That I can understand the simple logic in that. But and I've said this many times on this channel. You may not remember, but whenever we talk about things like gun control or the Second Amendment, I would say, look, um, you know, the political left likes to point out school shootings and say, see, this is why we need gun control. And the political right tends to think that arming the teachers and putting more police in schools and stuff would be the solution. So more guns is the solution to these types of things, as opposed to restricting guns. And and look, I see the logic in both sides, but I just say this: if we are going to have something like the Second Amendment, and I do believe that the Second Amendment, as written, means that you can own any weapon that's not covered by a treaty or something. So, for example, you can't own a nuclear weapon, you can't own a biological weapon, you can't own a chemical weapon, right? Those are all off limits because of international treaty. However, if you have $45 billion to spend on an M1 tank, knock yourself out. You can't drive it legally on the roads, but if you got a big ranch and you want to drive it around your property, defend your house with it, knock yourself out. However, or if you want to buy an F-16 and you have the 75, million or billion or whatever dollars that it costs to get one, great. And if you can afford the additional, couple of hundred grand or a couple million or whatever it is for a Sidewinder missile to put on it, awesome. Now, does that mean you have the ability to shoot a building with that Sidewinder missile? You absolutely do. Obviously, doesn't make it right to do it, but it makes it so that it is possible. And that's the thing. If you have the Second Amendment, meaning that people can buy and carry firearms, then shootings are going to happen. And Charlie Kirk was clearly on the side that the Second Amendment is worth it, right? And the irony is, of course, then he's shot. Um, but I think that's a debate worth having from time to time. Uh, is the Second Amendment truly worth it with what we see in this country and in this world today? And I'm not going to try to answer that. I'm saying that we should seriously look at the question, not just give a knee jerk political, ideological reaction to it, but we should actually contemplate the number of people that die from gun violence, and especially the horrific way things like this happen. You know, like the school shootings and stuff like that, and even the Charlie Kirk shooting. Does that mean that the Second Amendment is no longer worth it? I don't know. He is a hero if you heard some of the behind the scenes story. One story is when he visited a school and there was a kid crying on the edge, crying in the bleachers. Charlie found him and changed that kid's life. And who knows of it wasn't for Charlie, the kid might not be here today. That's one story of hundreds. Um, and there's also lots and lots of people that say that they went to a college campus and Charlie Kirk was there, and he made them feel depressed, and they got angry and all the look, that I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but helping someone in need, while that's a good thing to do, it's a moral thing to do. It's something that I wish more people would do. Um, that's not necessarily, to me at least, heroic. Heroic is to literally put yourself in danger for the protection of others. And I know some people argue that that's what he did when he went out on these college campuses, because he was defending the ideals of conservatism by going out there and facing these evil liberals on college campuses. But the truth is that if you go out onto a college campus and you start arguing with people there on any topic, and you do it enough to where you become, internet famous, you're going to piss some people off. It's but the even if that story is 100% true, which I don't know, is anecdotal stories like that are, I just say that there are so many stories. Like, man, I remember the story of Elon Musk going to the hospital and helping all the kids because he had all the money, and people just talk about what a great guy he was, and it was an AI generated picture of him, so I don't know if it's true or not. I'm sure that he was a good guy, but to me, to be a hero is to literally put yourself at risk for others. That's why I say the 9/11 firefighters were heroes. They charged into a burning building that ended up collapsing on them, and hundreds more died later from the toxins. So that's a hero to me, not someone that sees a kid who's struggling and helps them out. That's a great thing to do, but it's not heroic. If I hope that, I mean, I know I'm splitting hairs here, but at the same time, I think it's an important hair to split. If you're going to call someone a hero, you should do it for the right reasons. Problem is, people decide not to speak their minds now due to fear of being killed for it. I don't think it's just fear of being. Honestly, if it was fear of being killed, then nobody would be out there speaking any controversial issue. I think it's the fear of rejection. I think it's like even doing this live stream. I had trepidation about talking about this honestly and openly, because I was worried that, oh man, I'm going to piss off my audience, because I know that my audience tends to lean MAGA, and so and I don't want to piss you guys off, but I promised you from day one that I would only speak my genuine opinion on things, and that's what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter to me if that opinion happens to be popular, as my unfortunate decline has proven. Um, and keeping families together. So, fear of not being killed for it and keeping families together. I'm not sure how that flows, but okay. Absence of fathers being a big problem. Well, that's true. That's because you put a nickel under the scale. I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Maybe they're big music fans. Again, not sure what you're talking about. Rex Trek says, speaking of Kirk's death, I hear turtlenecks are making a comeback too soon. I don't even get that. Sorry. The state asked them to come in. Gorilla, 16 minutes. I understand if the state asks them to come in, that's fine and dandy. 16 minutes. Don't tell me that in 16 minutes from the time the guy got shot, the governor decided we need federal assistance at this law enforcement. He calls up the FBI, and the FBI is like, sure, we're going to help you, and we'll dispatch some agents. And by the way, if you listen to Patel, they had FBI agents there, not only the local agents, but they had agents from Nevada, they had agents from Quantico, they had agents from all over the country, specialists in this kind of stuff, descend on this school in order to solve this case. Show me where that happens. Why is he getting special treatment? It's not right. We're supposed, and if anything, it's ironic, but Charlie Kirk, who always liked to advocate the fact that we're all equal under the law, is also his death has proven that some of us are more equal than others. Might have helped. I think he does wear a bulletproof. From my understanding, he was actually wearing I saw one video that says that the bullet actually hit his bulletproof vest and ricocheted up into his neck. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think he was in the habit of wearing bulletproof vests under his shirt. He's president. I again don't know what you're talking about there. It was because he was personal friends with Trump. I don't think he was personal. He did know Trump, but I think he was actually personal. Especially if you listen to his wife's speech, which I'm not going to criticize right now because I have my opinions on it, but whatever. But according to her speech, they were really close friends with JD Vance. The kids aren't public figures. So what? And that's my point. Everybody should be treated the same. You don't, and by the way, does that mean that if any popular influencer is ever murdered, that the entire FBI is going to descend on it and help them, and Donald Trump is going to give us updates, and Kash Patel is going to personally oversee the investigation? Is that what that means? That anytime a big influencer dies, that it's a matter of federal importance? It's because Charlie Kirk was a close personal friend. That's not an excuse. Again, being friends with the president or the vice president or anybody else in high places should not mean that you get more rights than others. I'm sorry, that's disgusting to me. I can't think of a better word. It's disgusting. The idea that you get special treatment because you're buddy with the president is wrong. And I don't mean it's wrong and then it's incorrect. It is correct that that happens, but it's wrong. It is absolutely sick. Trump used it as an opportunity to attack Tim Walz, and Republican congressmen made jokes about it. I don't know the truth of that, so I can't really comment. Also, hardly anyone cares that two children were shot at the same time as Charlie was, and nobody gives a crap about them. Yeah, that's the thing. Nobody, most people don't even realize that there was a school shooting. They just know that, oh, Charlie Kirk. And Rex Trek says it's not both sides. MAGA is a mental illness. Look, I have my problems with MAGA, but it is both sides. The radical left, who have been cheering the death of Charlie Kirk, are absolutely disgusting. The girl says, "How do I have a mental illness?" Did the guy confess? Apparently, yes. The timeline of things is that the guy's father convinced him to turn himself in. So yeah. So the what happens now? We'll see. Will there be a? And by the way, A confession, legally speaking, while it is an admission of guilt, you are still innocent until a judge convicts you, right? So because the judge can determine, and it does happen sometimes, that maybe the confession was done under duress. Maybe this is a guy looking, like you have, and there are sick people that do this, right? Maybe the guy was like, I want attention, so he goes and confesses for a crime he did not commit, because he wants to go down in history as the guy that shot Charlie Kirk. So I don't know, and until that conviction is handed down, it's just like, look, I didn't call Trump a criminal until he was convicted, and so same thing here. I heard he actually turned himself in. I believe he did. Well, it seemed to upset a lot of people by revealing their ignorance. He seemed to upset a lot of people by revealing their ignorance. Um, on some things, I think you're well, okay. So I would agree with you on some of the like misconceptions people have. When people would just go out and say that Donald Trump is a racist, for example. I have a lot of accusations against Trump, and but I won't say he's a racist because he hasn't done anything to show that he is racist specifically. I have my concerns about people who are racist tend to be encouraged by his stances on certain issues and his policies. But I don't. But just because racists happen to like him doesn't make him a racist. Um, and so Charlie Kirk is good at exposing that in people. Um, but that doesn't mean he's right on everything. And sometimes I think that he doesn't listen to the other people or didn't care. And the same is true, like I said, of other people like him. These highly intelligent, very articulate debaters that go around, like Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Candace Owens. They'll go around and they have, and it's like you ask them something and bam, they have one of a brilliant gaslighting answer already saved and ready to go, and they're very, very good at it. Gaslighting is a fallacious way of debating, but it's an effective way of debating. And when I say gaslighting, what I mean is somebody will say, well, I think that it's wrong that this happening, and then it'll be, well, what about this and 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 this, and you can't respond to that, right? If somebody throws 75 things at you, that's not a legitimate answer in a debate. What you need to do is answer one thing at a time. Because when you start going point after point after point after point in one quick roll, then you're purposely making it so that there's no way for the other person to effectively respond. And I get that that's a winning tactic because if the other person can't effectively respond, it makes you look like you're far superior. But in actuality, what you're doing is dishonest. I would say unpack one issue at a time. Trump, the most anticipated demise in modern history. People will remember where they were when they heard the great news. Worldwide celebrations, parties will be epic. What are you even talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about, Rex. Really. Schwario's in the house. How you doing? Gorilla says, you want to handle extreme comments because right now his comments are just pissing me off with stupid comments. Most not true. I'm just getting pissed off and don't want to be biased if I hide them. Um, if you're talking about Rex, I want to know what Rex is even talking about. I don't get it. And then he says, never mind. Not sure why. Maybe somebody timed him out because I can't see that unfortunately on in EV Mux. It doesn't show me when somebody gets timed out. And sorry, I was AFK. And then he says he went too far. He started saying the world would cheer for Trump's death. I'm not going to listen to just Timu Forrest Gump buzzwords and hose for a man to die. If you're okay, so is that what he was trying to say? Say, oh, is that when Trump dies, people would do that? Yeah, if that's what he feels like, I mean, that's disgusting. If that's what he's trying to say, I didn't quite read that from that same comment. I thought that he was trying to quote Trump because it sounded like something that you would, put in Trump's mouth. Oh, parties will be it'll be the greatest celebration of all time. That kind of thing. That's and so if he's talking about the demise of Trump, then yeah, that's just messed up. Steven Crowder does the same thing when he does his public change my mind debates. Yeah, I agree. And you know what? I'm not defending or attacking anybody in particular as far as, but that tactic is jacked up. It's effective, but it's not honest. And if I'm going to win or lose a debate, I want to do it honestly. Salty, your knit, the one in the chat that is pissing me off. I'm not sure what you mean there, Gorilla. You got to be more specific. If you're talking about Rex Trek, I mean, obviously, if he's talking about Trump there, he's just being a dick. Did you see the scary video LDG put up called The Last Straw? The video tripped me out, dude. Sorry, go off topic. No, I have not. And so, yeah, no comment. And on campus, the people are pissing off the kids who aren't all mature enough to consider all consequences. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If you're gonna go poke the hornet's nest, it's like when I first heard Charlie Kirk was shot, my response was, I'm shocked but not surprised. And because you're going to go around, if you're going to make a living poking hornets' nests, don't be surprised when the hornets start stinging. I'd like to encourage to listen more in the sound bites because a lot of people using only one line out of context. Look, I have listened to entire sessions of Charlie Kirk on campus, and so he is wrong, or he was wrong on race. He is right on a lot of stuff, but on race, he was absolutely wrong. LDG is a bit crazy with the AI videos. The gorilla is weird too. Again, haven't seen it. Marion says, well, what's sick is the people who are posting disgusting memes about him getting done right there on stage. And even the man who stood up and cheered right there in front of the crime scene. Yeah, that kind of stuff is sick. I think that goes without saying. Keeping families together and lack of fathers, just two things Kirk always seemed to argue for. Well, those are two things. But you see, here's the thing. And maybe you're missing the point here. That has nothing to do with the fact that he's wrong on race. I said he's right on a lot of things, but he's still wrong on race. And so the fact that he believed in keeping families together and lack of fathers being a problem which is true. Anybody can say that because, I mean, just look around. But the thing is that then to generalize the way that he does with particularly the black experience in America, to pretend that racism doesn't really exist, that really the problems in the black community are all self-inflicted, that it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the black experience in this country. You're looking at statistics and numbers and trying to put together a story and a narrative that doesn't take into account the actual experiences of people. He wasn't wearing a vest. If you look at the video, his lips were showing. His lips were showing. What would his lips have to do with wearing a vest? Maybe that's a mistyping. I don't know. I agree. I'm just pointing out that the reason school shootings doesn't get more press now is because they become more common and they're not public figures. Yeah, I get that, but if we desensitize ourselves to our own children being shot and killed, what kind of a society are we? We get really worked up because a an influencer is killed, but we don't give a crap about some innocent kids. No, I will not capitulate on that. I mean, I understand that that might be the reasoning, but that reasoning is sick. Very unfortunate, to put it mildly. Yes. Music by Brian. Don't know if I've talked to you before. Sorry, my first comment was deleted. I said Republicans made jokes when those two Democrat senators were targeted by Bolter in June. Well, and look, it is both sides of the street that do this, right? When if a liberal is hurt, or shot or whatever, then yeah, conservatives will either say nothing, or they'll make jokes, or they'll say how they got what they deserved, that kind of thing. Just like you see from the left when a Republican is shot. But anybody that's willing to say that, I'm sorry. Look, I said earlier, I absolutely despise Will Wheaton because of his comments wishing for the death of Trump online, right? However, if somebody shot Will Wheaton tomorrow, I would think that the shooter is a sick and horrible person, right? If somebody shot Nancy Pelosi, I would say the shooter is a sick and horrible person. I grew up in California under the reign of Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. I understand what those women believe, and I think what those women believe are sick and wrong and disgusting. And if somebody actually, like when that dude showed up at Nancy Pelosi's house and beat the crap out of her husband and everything, man, that guy, I have, say throw the book at. I don't know whatever happened to him, to be honest, but the electric chair is too good for him. I, but I say that about any horrible crime. You know what I say? I've said this before. If somebody is convicted of rape, then I think the punishment should be, you get your choice: death or castration. We're going to make sure you never rape anyone again. Like I said, there's insane people on both sides. There absolutely are. And where was Charlie Kirk on the ranking of conservative speakers? I didn't realize he was that big. He's bigger than Shapiro and Walsh and Poole and Jordan Peterson. No. Well, first of all, you're just listing a bunch of, again, influencers. I really hate that term, but that's what they are. They're people who are paid to go and influence opinions. That's what they do, right? Like Tim Pool, for as a wonderful example, was being paid by Russia when he was out there saying how horrible Ukraine was. And then, of course, he tries to deny that he knew that the money was coming from Russia, but whatever. But, these people are being paid for their opinions. So if you hear any influencer spouting some kind of strong opinion, I guarantee you there's a sponsorship behind it. And I mean, that to me is the worst thing about influencers, is that it's bought and sold influence. Yeah, it's insane people on both sides. I haven't heard any Democratic congressmen laughing about this, but it happens to Dems. They literally laugh about it. Look, again, I'm not trying to compare who did it worse. Okay, here's the thing, music. I get what you're saying, but the fact that Republicans have made jokes about Democrats being shot in the past does not mean that we can excuse Democrats from making jokes about Republicans getting shot, right? And yeah, point out Paul Pelosi. Excuse me, a little bit of congestion going on, but yeah, and Paul Pelosi is a great example. But at the same time, the fact that Republicans were at best unsympathetic about Paul Pelosi does not mean that we should just shrug off Charlie Kirk, right? Or that it's okay when liberals make jokes or celebrate the fact that Charlie Kirk is dead. I think that it's sick and wrong on both sides, and the problem is And this is another, in my opinion, music, and don't get me wrong, I know you're probably not doing this on purpose, but it's true. To use that kind of a tactic in a discussion is, again, a fallacious argument. If, like, for example, when well, most of you guys are too young to remember, so I'm trying to think of something more recent. But, when a politician is accused of something, invariably that politician will think of something worse that their opponent has done. And and so instead of responding to the accusation, you deflect and try to make it about somebody else. Okay? This is not a discussion about Paul Pelosi. It's a discussion about Charlie Kirk. And they are two different incidents. And yes, the time to have a discussion about Paul Pelosi was when Paul Pelosi was attacked, not now, right? And unless your point is just to say that anybody who makes fun of somebody for being attacked is sick and wrong, in which case I'll agree with you. No, he's hoping Trump dies because I have the exact same argument on Discord group. Okay, well, I don't do Discord. It's funny because who did Discord? The shooter. They actually talked about that in the press conference. They used Discord posts as evidence against him. You're not the one who's pissing me off. You asked. I hope I didn't piss anyone off too much. Don't worry about it. Gorilla. I never get mad at anybody for expressing the sincere opinions, even when I disagree with them, even if I think that those opinions are disgusting. I don't get mad at people if they're expressing their honest opinions. However, the reason I got on Music by Brian is just because deflection is not, that you're not talking. If you want to talk about Charlie Kirk, let's talk about Charlie Kirk. We're not here to talk about Paul Pelosi. I'm disgusted that there's merchandise being sold of him being shot. I didn't even know about that. So, if that is, then yeah, that's wrong. And in fact, I would say this: if somebody's selling like a coffee mug with a picture of him being shot on it or something, if I were Kirk's widow, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. I would sue the crap out of him. Saying lack of fathers is rarely actually caring about the issue. Usually, people just say that as code for their racist views. Music, again, you don't. I hate when people say, "Oh, that's code for." Look, if somebody wants to point out the lack of fathers is a problem in modern day America, and Charlie Kirk was quick to say this, although he usually pointed it out as just in the black community, he didn't say anything about fatherless homes in the white community. But because it's usually when people ask him about his racist views, that that subject would come up. Um, I think that if he genuinely believes it, I do. I think that he genuinely believes that the lack of fathers in black homes in America is a cause of much, if not all, of these problems for Black America, and that's because if you look at statistics and you look at reality, those are two different things. Statistics are numbers, and they can say, okay, so for example, there is an epidemic of homes without a father in them. However, and this is something a lot of people don't understand. It's common in the black community, particularly the lower class black community, people that are struggling, that are getting any kind of public assistance, for the father to be present, but to not hold residence there. Not because he doesn't love his kids, not because he doesn't care, but because if he were to actually take residence in the house and if he were to actually be married to the mother, then all of a sudden any and all benefits that the kids get or the mother gets disappear. Right? And in fact, there was a time that me and my wife would talk about, mostly joking, but it's true. We'd talk about, we would be much better off if we got divorced. When This was when our kids were little, because if we had gotten divorced, then tax wise and government benefits and stuff like that would increase exponentially beneficial. And so, we would, I can certainly understand why that happens. I've heard story after story after story from my mother in law, who sadly has passed away some time ago now. But my mother in law was a social worker. And so one of the things she had to do was home inspections on people who get various benefits. And, there have been multiple times where she would go into the house and find evidence that the man was living there or find the man, So it's one of those things that it's not an uncommon practice because it's a way to try to survive. And I know you can say it's fraudulent, and it is, but it's also a way to navigate a system that is set up basically against them. And not just that. When I say them, I don't necessarily mean blacks. I mean poor people. The American system is designed to benefit those with money, and I know a lot of people like to deny that, but it's just truth is truth, man. Um, Unfortunately, some people will do any way to make a buck. Well, that is true. Meant to say nipples. His nipples were showing through his shirt, so no vest. Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense than his lips. So I saw one person post a video that tried to show that he had a vest on, but I didn't know if there's any truth to it. That's why I don't really talk about that much. Uh, Wait, so you're doing a stream time on Kirk, but don't care about every school shooting? Unfortunately, it's a bigger story. Well, I'm doing a stream about my disgust in the aftermath of the Kirk shooting. But notice, right at the beginning of this stream and multiple times through this stream, I've talked about the recent school shootings because I do think they're more important. And I do think that Kash Patel and the director of the ATF and President Trump should be invested in dealing with these situations, but they're simply not. And I can understand some of it because most of the time, and I don't know what this because unfortunately there's just not a lot of news out there on the recent shooting because everybody's talking about Charlie Kirk. But most of the time in these shooting situations, the shooter ends up being killed by police or killing themselves, right? That's the most common way that these shootings end. And I don't know if that happened with this particular shooting. But if the shooter did, in fact, kill themselves at the end or died by police gunfire at the end, then even though there still needs to be an investigation done, the investigation isn't quite as high a priority that would require the director of the FBI to personally show up, right? It wouldn't require that you bring in people from all over the country because you can take your time with it because the shooter is not only, in custody, but is dead. So I get that. But, the funny, and this one has just gotten so much reaction that I think that's the story. It's not the fact that Charlie Kirk was shot is almost incidental compared to the level of reaction that people have had. I know a lot of people who are on the right uh, were shocked and appalled. I assume you're talking about the Pelosi issue. By the Minnesota Senator. Oh, by the Minnesota Senators. I was one of them. See, I don't remember that specific thing, but if I had seen that where somebody was making jokes about it, I would be equally appalled. Maybe it was like the bat suit. I'm not sure what you mean there. He was slayed to take over the MC and maybe one day be president. I'm not sure who or what you're talking about there. Um, Gorilla Trump made two statements. One said that it would not be tolerated. The other was that he wouldn't be calling Tim Walz. He's a whack job. Compare that to his reaction to this. And then Gorilla, and you don't have to go all caps, Gorilla. I'm reading all the comments, so I understand you're passionate about this, but try to breathe. That Tim Pool claim was debunked. He licensed his content out to another company, and that company duped him. The DOJ cleared all that up. I'm sure they did. However, Tim Pool himself admitted it. And so, look, the money was, he was being paid exorbitant amounts of money from Russia while he was spouting pro Russian propaganda. And that is a fact, right? It actually, influencers are paid to influence. That's what they do. That's all that they do. When you see big name influencers, whether it's on the left or on the right, or it's for makeup products, or it's for 3D printers, or it's for anything else, these people are paid big money to convince you or influence you to one position or another. That's what they do. That's what the word influencer actually means. So please don't waste your breath trying to tell me how Tim Pool is innocent as the wind driven snow. Because Tim Pool makes ungodly amounts of money and is paid for his opinions. Now, different influencers have, well, obviously there's not enough money in the world to pay Tim Pool to alienate his audience by suddenly coming out as a liberal. But what they do is they say, hey, can you talk about this more? Can you talk about this more? Here's a few $1,000s. And the Russian thing, he was getting something on the order of like $10,000 to $20,000 a month. I guess streaming about Kirk is reaction to get more publicity. Sorry. No, you know what? This channel is not going to get a lot of publicity no matter what. I have the same group of people here every time. And I mean, I get it. The algorithm hates me and I pissed off a lot of people, and that's okay. I'm talking about it because it's what was on my mind. No other reason. Where you say you wouldn't be calling him? Yeah, I haven't heard any of that specifically, so yeah, don't know. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying making fun of Kirk is okay. I'm showing that Republican politicians have been doing this for years. Nothing is happening in a vacuum. And again, I'm saying that is irrelevant. I think that it was disgusting then, and I think it's disgusting now. But the problem is, why would it be appropriate? Like, okay, so there are liberals right now, basically, out there celebrating the fact that Kirk is dead, right? And I say, oh, that's disgusting. And so your argument is, yeah, but Republicans did it too. Well, what's the point of that argument? Are you trying to say it's not bad that the Democrats did it, or are you just trying to, demean the Republicans? Because I already said I thought the Republicans were disgusting in their overreaction, calling him a martyr and all that. Maybe you didn't hear that part. But I started out by saying that the reaction on both sides, from the extreme left and the extreme right, both sides have been disgusting. And by the way, I'm sure a lot of the people that are trying to basically make Kirk into some kind of saint are the same people that would laugh when the same thing happened to a Democrat, right? To be a politician, almost by job description, is to be a hypocrite. Actually, I'd say this: to be an ideologue is to be a hypocrite. That's why I'm not an ideologue. If you cannot see the good in a liberal idea, that's a genuinely good idea, just because it's a liberal idea, you're an ideologue. And I think it's funny because even though it's not the root word, ideologue starts with idiot, right? So the I find that's I've said before, I'm conservative on most things, but on some things I'm very, very liberal on, and on those things I know I piss off a lot of you guys. Like when I talk about schools or I talk about healthcare, right? Because I'm pretty liberal on those. But I'm also a federal minimalist. So I believe that the federal government should be as small and efficient as possible. But what we do, we need to do it right. And I think that some systems in the federal government need to be completely and utterly overhauled, like entitlement programs, particularly Social Security, which I know is I'm biting the hand that feeds me because that's how I survive is from Social Security. But at the same time, the Social Security system is broken and needs to be fixed, but nobody's willing to do it. Nobody. Says, Gorilla, you'll have to look it up, but yes, that's what he said. Doesn't matter. Look, guys, can we get off of the past, please? Did you actually hear from someone claiming it? Let's see. I'm not deflecting, I'm pointing out the hypocrisy. That is deflecting. I'm not, look, I didn't, unless you're accusing me of something, it's irrelevant to the discussion. I did not celebrate when Paul Pelosi was attacked, right? And I'm not celebrating now. And I think anybody that thinks that an attack on Paul Pelosi was being horrible, and I think the people that are saying that the attack on Charlie Kirk are horrible. I think the shooters or in the case of Paul, the attackers are people that deserve the full penalty of law. But I also think that in fact, if you think about it, the Pelosi case there, first of all, the FBI would be the proper jurisdiction because public official and all that, and and we should have had a huge sweeping investigation that we really didn't. However, all that being said, it is a deflection to bring up the past and to point out that the other side did bad things. The only reason to do that is to deflect. I'm not trying to be a jerk music, but can you please try to stick to the actual topic, which is not Paul Pelosi. It's not the Democrats' reaction to things in the past. It's what's going on today. Girl, have you tried to look at it? Okay, I'm not more on that. And then he says, Erica. Oh, Mrs. Kirk is Erica. Okay. I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out. I don't care. I'm not calling him. Why would I call him? And when I say, how are you doing? Okay, I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Let me get past all this stuff. This is what Trump said right after the killings. No offense, but you're reading my comments out of context. I'm reading all the comments except for the last couple. I've read every one of them. Okay? If you want to have proper context in them, then you need to put in proper context rather than just say it's out of context because I'm not reading your mind. Okay? I'm not reading it out of context because I've read them all. And responding to my arguments, I'm not actually making it. It's not your fault. Context is lost in this format. No, here's the problem. It's not that context is lost in this format. It's that people don't like to use it. You want to put out a bullet point, a bumper sticker, if you will. And I understand you're limited to how much you can type out. But I understand from your perspective, you're just pointing out hypocrisy from the other side. But you are refusing to hear the fact that doing so is a deflection from the current event. This is not about Paul Pelosi. This is not about the hypocrisy of the Republicans. I'm talking about what's going on right now, not what happened in the past. I hope you can understand that. I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but we're talking about the reaction to Kirk's killing, not the reaction to Paul Pelosi or anybody else in the past. And to bring those up is by definition a deflection because you're bringing into it something that is unrelated in order to what? Try to say Republicans are bad? I already said that the Republican response is bad. Charlie Kirk is not a saint. He's not a hero. He's not a martyr. He is an influencer who is paid big money to go out to college campuses and be controversial, and that got him killed. But Grant, the guy that did it is an absolute whack job and deserves the full penalty of law. Trump also talked about the murder of the young lady on train's murder in North Carolina. Just horrible what happened to her. I didn't hear him give updates on the case. Well, I mean, I know he would say, "Oh, that's a horrible thing, horrible, horrible, horrible." I can't. I don't like the way he talks, but I get it. But in the case of Charlie Kirk, he was giving blow by blow updates. Like I said, the fact that he was killed was announced by Trump, not his press secretary, not the people doing the investigation, not the hospital, Trump. And then the updates on how the arrest of what's his name that's being accused of it, again announced by Trump, not his press secretary, not the FBI. I mean, honestly, the announcement should have come from the FBI, not from President Trump. Or actually, it should have come from the local police because the FBI shouldn't have even been involved. Just like mainstream news media calling him a suspect. No man's a suspect. No, he's not a suspect. There's camera footage of him committing the murder on the train. Well, Robert, the reason you call him a suspect is because legally that's his status. Until he is, I know it sounds horrible. I know you see video of the guy committing a crime, but he is innocent until proven guilty. That might be enough proof for you, but that's irrelevant. It needs to be proof to a jury. And the way that our legal system works is that until a jury or a judge convicts you of a crime, you are not guilty of that crime. And so that's the whole core of our legal system. And I believe in that core. And so I have no problem with them calling him a suspect until he is convicted. Half the time I don't realize KOs are on. I'm not sure what you're saying there. I know it was CAOS. Maybe I'm losing my mind, but I don't know what that means. Never heard of him spouting pro-Russian content, though he has called the Ukraine on some of their BS. Yeah, he was saying that the real enemy of the United States is Ukraine. He was basically he was a propaganda piece during the height of the discussion on Ukraine, which nobody's talking about now, about how horrible Ukraine is. And I'm sorry, even if Ukraine was every bit as horrible as the worst accusations of it are, if Volodymyr truly is an evil dictator, that doesn't mean that Russia has the right to invade. Sorry, not sorry. And now granted, I would see, like, for example, I think a just invasion would be something like what happened in Operation Desert Storm. Was it Desert Storm? No. Oh man, I can't remember what it's called now. But the first Iraq War, where George H.W. Bush uh, retook Kuwait from Iraq after Iraq invaded. That was a just war, right? Because Iraq had no right to invade Kuwait. And so we stepped in and said, no, you're not going to do that. But you know what we didn't do? We didn't take out Iraq. Not in that war. LOL, I literally said, I'm not saying it's not bad. Dude, just stop reading my comments and they weren't even directed to you initially. Well, if you want to say something that has nothing to do with me, don't post it on my channel because I read all the comments. I'm not like, granted, I'm a small time guy. So, I don't have the problem of having so many comments that I can't read them all. And I get what you're saying, but even if it's a response to somebody else, I'm going to read it most of the time. And if I see that what you're saying has some BS in it, I'm going to call you out on it. That's just what I do. All you need to do fix Social Security is raise the cap on Social Security wages. Boom, fixed overnight. Rich people shouldn't be able to avoid paying their share in the system they benefit from. I disagree, but and I'll tell you, I've said this before, and I hope you're still listening, music, because my fix on Social Security is a little different than that. I think that's part of it. I will agree with you in part. However, I know everybody thinks that the rich, need to pay their fair share, and then everything will be fixed. The problem is that there aren't enough rich people to actually fix the system that way. Because and there's another, oh well, there are people that make millions of dollars every year, right? That's true, but you know what those people don't make millions of dollars on? Payroll, which is where those taxes come into play, right? Like Elon Musk making $25 billion off the federal government is not paying taxes on $25 billion because that's not his paycheck. It's his net worth, but it's not his paycheck. He's not getting money in that amount in the form of compensation for his job, which is what you are taxed for. So just saying that you're going to release the cap is not going to fix it. I do think that's part of the solution, but that's not going to fix it on its own. There isn't enough payroll in the world, well, in the United States at least, to fix the system just by raising the cap. I think there's two things you need to do. Raise the cap is one of them. The other is to, when we talk about the retirement age, you basically eliminate the retirement age. You make it so Social Security is not a benefit just for retirement because it's not, that's unsustainable. Instead, it is a disability program, period. And so, if you're 80 years old and you're able-bodied and able to work, and the doctors say, "Sorry, you're perfectly healthy," then get your butt to work. I believe in the biblical principle that if you're not willing to work, you should not eat. The key word there is willing. There are, even though with my MS and everything, I am a physical wreck. But you know what I do every single day that I'm able to, which lately has been 7 days a week, and it's exhausting. I get in my car and spend the entire day in my car driving Uber to try and make up for the fact that Social Security pays me diddly squat. And so, um, people who are unwilling to work should not eat. Yeah, dude, I'm out of here. You don't understand anything about what I'm talking. All of a sudden, you probably didn't hear my whole Social Security rant. Don't understand anything about what I'm talking to. Half the time, I'm talking on to someone else, and you read it only for understanding half the sentence. It's irritating as F. Okay. Bye. Hi, Salty. Am I in time for Alex Bogey Show? He hasn't been here in a little while. I miss Alex. But good to see you, yeah. And Stan says, no, he wasn't around today. And then Robert says, Solid Trigger. So are you subscribed to John Stossel YouTube channel yet? Since he's a libertarian and an independent journalist now, he has some great content. You know what? No, I don't know who John Stossel even is, but I will say this, Robert. And please, I'm not trying to throw a pity party for myself, but I'm just throwing the facts out there. I right now hardly ever get a chance to watch any YouTube whatsoever because when I am awake, I am either basically doing this, occasionally going out with my wife, and the rest of the time I'm in my car driving Uber. And I shouldn't be doing all that. And probably some of the health problems I'm having are because I'm overexerting myself. But I have to. And I'm an old-fashioned guy. I say that, you know what, if it has to be done, I have to do it. That's the end of the story. Because I can't sit around and wait for the government to fix it. And, unfortunately, yes, I'm getting Social Security, but Social Security is like a third of what I was making before. So it's, insulting. And I understand, like as a retirement supplement, I can see how Social Security could be beneficial because if you're 65, 67, whatever, and you plan for retirement, you got a 401k or a pension or something like that, and and then you get Social Security on top of it. Bonus, right? That's how it was for my dad. That's how it was for my mom. A lot of people they retire and they have like either a 401k or some kind of pension, but then they also get Social Security, which is just like bonus money. And so, like for my mom, she was living. Even after my dad died, she had my dad's pension, she had his 401k, and she was getting Social Security. She didn't need it. She was completely able bodied until about a month before she died. And so I say eliminate the retirement age because people that can work should. And people that should not work for medical reasons should not be forced to work themselves to death in some cases just because we don't want to pay them enough because we got to give money to the billionaires who are retired. And I'm sorry, yes, that was a whole thing. Like when Ross Perot was running for president, loved that guy. He was nut, but I loved him. He was a Texas oil billionaire. And this was in the days when being a billionaire was an extremely rare thing because this was back in the early 90s. I think it was 92 when he first ran. And when he held up during his campaign his actual Social Security check, and he was like, "Why am I getting this?" You know, and he's right. Stanley says you miss Alex's super chats. That is true, but I miss Alex more than his super chats. I mean, yes, super chats are awesome and wonderful, and when I do occasionally get a little bit of money from the YouTube channel, I appreciate it more than I can say. However, I can't count on that. It's not a regular source of income. I don't have a large enough audience to really be able to bank on that. I'm not Nerdrotic or Doomcock or something where I can sit there and do a live stream for a couple hours and make $10,000. It doesn't work that way. I think I'm missing out on nerd fights or I'm majorly out of line. No, nerd fights didn't happen this week. The Mr. Know-It-All said that he had some personal issues he had to deal with. Don't know exactly what it was. He didn't say. So I'm not saying it was because he was distraught over Charlie Kirk because I don't know. And yeah, I did want to do a show, but he was unavailable. However, oh yeah. So since you mentioned it, let me say something real quick. Last week or so, I have been talking extensively with Danny, the Dork Knight. You guys remember the original co-host of Nerd Fights, and in fact, and Danny is the person who came up with the idea of Nerd Fights in the first place. I know that the credits for the show say created by Michael Crawford, but it's actually Danny deserves the credit. But I've been talking to him, and so he has in fact resolved. It sounds like the issues that I told him he needed to resolve before he could come back. And that's awesome and great and wonderful. So why isn't he back on? Well, because he's got an insane job right now. He's working 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. He's working for a startup company, and he's hoping that in a couple of months, once the company is actually up and running and everything's groovy, that he'll be able to get to something like a normal schedule and be able to do nerd fights again. And I can't wait. So I just want you guys to know that I have, in fact, been talking to Danny because I know some of you guys miss him horribly, and I miss him. And he sounds so much better talking to him. I can't wait to have him on and he wants to watch some more Battlestar Galactica. Note right there, and all that stuff. So we're gonna get to that. So Mr. Know-It-All's fault. My comments didn't get Ted, maybe read the other day. I want to throw him under the bus. No, that's all right. You can blame him. I have no problem with throwing him under the bus. Although he's so big that he wouldn't be throwing him under the bus. You could throw him in front of the bus, and the bus would crash into him, and the bus would be crushed. Last was Star Wars Day stream. Yes, that was our last thing, or Star Trek Day. Yeah, I really don't know who John Stossel is. Uh, he was a news anchor. Dateline, I believe, was the show. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Look, I am not big into media. I honestly, I don't listen to a lot of. Even when I do listen to YouTube, I don't listen to a lot of influencers because I can't stand them. They to me, and maybe it's just me, but they sound fake. And even though they may be talking about their sincerely held opinions, but a lot of times they just you can tell that they're being paid. Fed says, "Oh, I hate that. It's so dang common down here. People expect the government to fix everything. It vexes me to no end. I'm used to it when I've used it in my life when I needed it. Otherwise, I take care of myself." And I try to as best I can. I know, like I said, I'm working harder than I should because the federal government system is broken. But I'm not going to sit here and cry over spilt milk. I believe John Sussel left the corporate news media because he wasn't allowed to do news stories he wanted to do. Good for him. And didn't Danny introduce you to Mr. Know-It-All? Yes, he did. It was Danny. It's kind of funny because Danny said, "Hey, is it okay if I bring on a guest? I met this guy over on Criticless, and he's really cool. His name's Mr. Know-It-All." I said, "Sure, bring him on." And then he came on, and then he came back a couple of times, and then Danny dropped out, and Mr. Know-It-All stepped up. So, yeah. One thing that fills me with shame is about being an Aussie. And I try to be patriotic, but dang, it makes it hard here. Well, you should be more shamed about the fact that you live in a country that's literally trying to kill you all the time. And Trek reviewers here saying hi, which of course means it's